I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Patrick Thean, CEO of Gazelle Systems. He's the creator of the Rhythm software and author of Execute Without Drama. Patrick speaks around the world and was recently chosen to present at the YPO Global Showcase. He and his team of rhythm coaches help fast-growth companies connect their strategy to execution to maximize their growth. Patrick has done a great deal of work helping companies build high-performance teams. He's excited to share what he's learned with you here today. Patrick, it's great to have you here today.
Hey, Ryan, great. Thank you very much, man. And welcome everybody to this webcast. Excited to be here with everybody. So my topic today is high-performance teams, right? And so what do high-performance teams do? Well, they achieve strong results, and hopefully they do it with less waste. You want to be focused, you want to be aligned, you want to be accountable. So that's what a high-performance team should feel like. And if you have in a high-performance team, you want to be continually improving and continually getting more and more throughput. So two questions I would examine. There's really two parts to this equation. One is, what's the leader got to do? That's what we're going to work on today. And then the second question is, what's the team got to do? So in other words, for a high-performance team to happen, there are certain things that a leader of the company and the team has got to do. If you don't do those things, you cannot expect a high-performance team to thrive. Then secondly, how does the team need to respond? I'm going to do that in a couple of weeks, and it's just too long or too much content to do in a 1-hour webcast. So today we'll work on the first question. Now, we usually do these webcasts once a quarter, but I wanted you to get part 2 sooner, and due to my travel, I couldn't schedule another webcast this month. So in about 2 to 3 weeks, we will send you the recorded webcast as a gift from me to use so that you can take a look at how we examine that second question. And by the way, I recently taught for a day on execution for high-performance teams in Manila in the Taipan Conference, Building of Asian Giants. And so it was well received and lots of people getting good value there. So for today, let's examine the first question, what's a leader got to do? And so let's begin with the end in mind. I'm going to show you 4 things that as a leader of your company, you have to do. You got to hire only A managers. You have to provide clarity with accountability. And then you need to manage with simple job scorecards. And finally, you have to have a path of progress. And you got to, I use the word inspire. You've got to really inspire people onto a path of progress. So the very first thing, only A managers. And the question I want to ask you guys to think about right now is, do you only have A managers? When I've done this class in different countries and with different companies now, very few people would tell me that they only have A managers. Maybe the smaller companies would say, yeah, you know, we only have 5 or 6 managers. We can afford to have everyone be an A. But I want to share with you that you have to really strive towards getting every single manager to be an A. So ask yourself this question: how would your company be different if you only had A managers working at your firm? Every single one, 100%. So let me start with a brutal fact. Brutal fact number 1, high-performance teams, they don't work for poor managers. I'm sorry, they don't. They don't work for bozos. They don't tolerate what I call bozo managers who limit their potential. People say they cannot afford to find all A's. And some people say they can't afford the money, and some people say they can't afford the time it takes to go get those A's or the process it takes to go get those A's. And I'll tell you instead, you really cannot afford to not find all A's, because poor managers cause your best people to leave. And that is an even more expensive proposition than not having the A manager. This is one of my favorite books. It's a classic by Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman. It was actually Marcus Buckingham's first book. And in his book here, they did a lot of research. They noticed a few things about people who were doing very well, working on the strengths and everything else, that these folks really only wanted to work for great managers. And people quit people. And unfortunately, the best know they're really marketable, so they quit the fastest. Some of his research in later years showed a large chain that was noticing a difference in performance at different locations. And this company looked at themselves, a very well-known company actually, and they looked at themselves and they said, well, you know, what's going on? We have the same core values everywhere in every franchise. We have the same operating procedures in every franchise. And how is it that we're getting different results? So at first they thought maybe it has to do with location. This is a retail place. And so maybe it's due to location. So they looked at that. They thought maybe the richer neighborhoods were performing better. They were surprised to find that it was not. When they dug deeper, they found that actually it was totally based on the manager that was running the store. In a second case study that Marcus shared with me, he found that it was in a factory where there were a certain level of injuries. And what they found was same factory, same working conditions, the injuries came from teams that were running by a poor manager. So a bad manager can actually hurt you physically as well if you're working in a factory. So individual team performance were 100% dependent on the manager they work for. This is also consistent with a couple of other thought leaders, consistent with John Maxwell's book, The Law of the Leadership Lid, and consistent with Jim Collins' work as well on asking us to become level 5 leaders. So first thing is you got to go, get your A-level managers. And secondly, this is the worst part. You hire a bad manager or you put up with one, and guess what? This person, try as hard as he or she might, is not capable of creating high performance teams. So you want high performance teams, you really start with the manager. And so this is, A players, high A players, right? And B players, high C players. So who hired the B players? And the first part of this quote is from Steve Jobs, that A players, high A players, and B players, higher Cs. So who hired the B players? Well, if you've got a mirror, check it, because unfortunately, it was probably you. So you hired the B players, and you need to really focus on correcting those mistakes. Otherwise, the B players hire C players, and your B's and C's and company will grow exponentially. Okay, so what do I do about the A manager thing? Well, I'd suggest you upgrade to A managers only. And so here's 3 books on this topic by the same couple of guys. Top Grading was written a while back, and if you guys are not familiar with top grading, it's a phenomenal way to go out and hire and retain A players. It was written by Brad Smart. He has a new version of that just came out this year or is about to come out, Top Grading 3rd edition. And then his son, Jeff Smart, wrote the book Who that came out a year and a half ago. So these are 3 books that would help you tremendously. But the focus here is to upgrade to A managers only. So I was working with a customer recently, and a long-time customer actually, and they have been working hard on trying to get all their employees to perform at the best that they can perform at. After working for about a year on this, they found that their performance levels were really not really moving fast enough. And what we noticed was that they really were focused on getting everyone to be an A, which was good. Then I suggested that maybe what they should do is focus their energies more on the managers. So we peeled back the onion on the managers. We found that we actually did not have that many A managers. In other words, the percentage of A managers was about the same as the percentage of all the other employees being A's as well. And so as a coach, I suggested to them that maybe they should refocus their energy and really focus on getting 100% of the managers to be A. And I get the same pushback that I always get when I suggest that, oh man, it's not possible to get every single manager to be an A. And so they set new goals anyway, which, red, yellow, green, super green, right? Super green is a stretch goal. So green would be to at least have 75% of the managers to be A's. Red would be their current level. If they fall below the current level of A percentage managers, it would be a failure. And super green would be this 100% stretch goal. And so within 1 quarter of focusing on their managers, purely on getting A managers, they saw better results in the performance of the company. And by the way, there's multiple ways to get better performance, right? I'm not suggesting that you fire every single manager that's not an A. I'm suggesting, first of all, you work hard at getting the non-A manager to be an A, all right? Failing which, then you replace. But I would suggest first that you try and get the non-A manager to up his or her game to be an A. So I'm not suggesting you go out on a shooting spree. So let's talk about what performance looks like. So Jack Welch, from ex-CEO, famous CEO of GE, what he said is that performance, really you can look at it in two very objective ways. One is, are they delivering the results that you're expecting? And secondly, is the person behaving according to your culture? And so this is Jack's performance chart, which is well known by now, but I want to go over it with you a little bit. On the vertical axis, you have results. And results on the top and poor results on the bottom. And then on the horizontal axis, you have values. The values would be behavior and living your culture. So top right quadrant, right? Those are the A's. Those are the guys and gals that deliver great results and live our values. We love them. We love them dearly, and we just can't wait to work with them. We should have many more of these folks. And then on the bottom square, the yellow, the B, maybe these guys and gals are living our values well and but somehow the results are not exactly what we want them to be. So maybe these guys may be on the right bus, maybe they need more training, or maybe they're on the right bus but in the wrong seat on the bus. So we may have to get them something else that they can do to up the game from B to A. And then the top left quadrant, you have good results and poor values, and these are kind of the terrorists. These are the mavericks. These are folks that produce great results, but we don't really enjoy working with them, and they don't really live our values very well. They don't behave great with us, and Jack Welch in his book actually calls these the cancers. He says if you want to build a great organization, you really have to get rid of these folks who are not living your core values. No way to build a great company otherwise. And finally, in the bottom left quadrant, we have poor results, poor values. We don't even like these guys and not performing. So I jokingly always say, why don't we just go shoot them, right? I mean, why are they still breathing our air, drinking our water, eating our food in our company? They can probably be an A player somewhere else. So first start with the managers, and oftentimes I get asked, how do I make sure that my managers are in the right category? And I would say you have to, that's why I asked the question, the poll, which is how often do you assess? And I would suggest that you actually assess on a quarterly basis, and I will cover ways to maybe assess quicker, because I know some people in the room may be thinking, oh my goodness, on a quarterly basis, that just takes a lot of time. So Ryan, I think this is a good time as I finished the first key point to see if there are any questions out there.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions, and while I'm answering these questions, go ahead and ask your questions through the GoToMeeting control panel if you have one. First, Greg is asking, is it realistic to have every manager an A?
Yes, so Greg, thanks for asking that question. I get this all the time, like I said, in fact, when I do private coaching sessions with companies, this is the first question I get, especially the companies of any good size. They'll say, hey, it's not possible to get every single manager an A. And my answer is yes, I think it is possible. It is hard. It's hard to get it done. No one said it was easy, but it's absolutely possible. In fact, I'll share with you that it's consistent also with what Jim Collins recently taught us at Vern's Growth Summit, Leadership Summit, that in the key seats, you cannot not have an A player. And what he said is that in your key seats, as you run and grow your company, you have to make sure that you only have A players in there. And I would suggest that every single manager who manages employees that you have a payroll for, I think that's a pretty key seat.
Then David's asking this question. He says, I started with A players, and then the business grew. And as we grew, I made the assumption that an A player staff member would also be an A player manager. Is that a good assumption?
David, that's a typical assumption, especially if our companies are growing quickly and we feel the need to reward people who have done very well. And I made this mistake myself too in my first company, and we were growing like wildfire. I found that oftentimes, in my experience, I made the mistake of taking a great programmer, individual contributor, and making him or her a poor manager. So oftentimes, a great individual contributor doesn't make a great manager because it's really a different skill set, right? So if we do that, we need to provide that person with good managerial training. And by the way, some of the best companies in the world provide a dual track because oftentimes that great individual performer is tempted to become a manager because they want recognition and they want financial gain. So the best companies in the world often provide a dual track. You can continue being a great contributor or move into management, but you don't have to, and both tracks give you, financial rewards as well as esteem and importance in the company.
And I have another question from Guy. He's asking, how do you grade employees' value?
How do you grade employees' value? You mean like, is Guy referring to like the core values? Is that what he means?
I believe so. There's a couple of that same pattern. How do you assess their values? Do you have a recommended way to assess values? How do you grade they're in line with the values?
That's a great question. So I'd like you to hold that question. I actually have a chart that is coming up later in the class where I will actually show you a grading scale of how to grade results, skills, as well as core values.
And I have one more from Eric before we move on. He asks, how often have you seen a C performer become an A?
So a C performer becoming an A, I found it does happen when the overall leader, you know, the CEO or whoever it is that's leading that person, inspires that person enough to do so. So I do think that change happens both ways. You know, the leader has to inspire. Now, I found though that whenever I put a person who's a C player into what I call probation, that's almost like a death warrant. So I found that when I put someone officially in probation, that person never comes back out alive. But if somehow before that person hits that rock bottom of probation, if we could inspire them, find out, first of all, if that person, is it because of a skill or what's causing that person's performance. I'll share with you one quick story. I had a friend who had a C player well, he called him a C player, but he really lived the values. And he discovered that that person actually did not like his job. I was taking one for the team because the company was small. There was nobody else to do that. And then he asked him, he said, before I let him go, he told me, he said, Patrick, I went and I asked him what job he would like. He chose a completely different job, gave him that job, and within 1 quarter, he was acing the other job. So first question is that person living your values? If he's not living your values, I find very, very difficult to change. If he's living your values, there's maybe a different job that he may do well in. Okay, Ryan.
Okay, let's keep
moving. We need to march on, okay? All right,
yep.
Our second point, second of the 4, clarity with accountability. So guess what? A players also deliver C-level work when they are overtasked. So we have this tool. It's a very old tool from Gazelle's, one of our oldest tools, and I love it because it gives clarity with accountability. And I get this question all the time. You know, how do I delegate? How do I really let go and allow this thing to happen called autonomy? You know, it'd be great if my people can just run on automatic. And so recently in Taipan, in Manila, this was back in April, I pulled out this tool and I said, hey, how many of you have ever been to a Rockefeller Habits workshop? And a bunch of hands went up. I said, how many of you have seen this tool? A bunch of hands put up. I said, how many of you have walked through this tool in a workshop? A bunch of hands went up. And I said, how many of you have actually used this in your company to drive performance? And all the hands came down. So I asked this question and the whole room was quiet. I said, hey, I want to know why. Why is it that this is one of our simplest tools? It's a beautiful tool. It's going to help you create high-performance teams. Why is no one in the room using it to drive performance strongly? And so someone put their hand and said, well, Patrick, for me, I have to share with you, it's about commitment. And I said, really? Tell me what that means. He said, well, you know, if I commit to 2 things that I want this person to do, then I kind of have to also commit that I'm not going to bug him or her with the other 3 things that person is doing for me. So until I can find a replacement for the other 3 things that this person is doing for me, it's really hard for me to commit to 2 things that need to be done. And a lot of people in the room kind of resonated with them. So I wonder how many of you in this room, this virtual room, resonate with that particular answer as well. That is, a challenge here is a commitment. You know, if we quantify exactly the 2 or 3 things we want someone to do, what about all the other things that we would like that person to do as well? Unfortunately, maybe not as important, and unfortunately, maybe causing us to not have clear accountability. So today, my goal is to help you get comfortable with this tool. Lots of times, people have said to me, Patrick, this tool is very simple, but we're just not comfortable driving it because of the commitment thing. So why do you do this? Now, here are some symptoms that I would suggest to you, to me that you might want to pull this tool out. The first is, I know I have A players who are delivering C work. How do I know that? Because I know that this person is overburdened, and I just know because he's done or she's done great work before. So I know that this A player is now delivering C work. I, as a manager or leader, I can't seem to delegate. You know, I'm afraid because I can't seem to inspect if the person is on track or not. And finally, I'm just frustrated with my people on my team. You know, somehow I got to chase them all the time, and they don't seem to do all the right things I like them to do. Some of these reasons are because of a lack of clarity and accountability. So let me tell you a quick customer story. A client of mine this happened when they were about a $2 million business, very successful company today, about a $15 million company. And the client said he had 3 roles, and he was very overtasked. And the CEO actually was not doing great work. And so I sat down with the CEO, and I said, so how many roles do you have? Let's pull out this wonderful tool. And Jack said that he only had 3 roles: CEO, CFO, and sales. I said, great, let's examine that further. So as we peel back the onion, it turned out he had a lot more roles. He was a CEO, yes. He was also a CFO, yes. But his stuff was so complex that he had to do the billing himself, or rather he had to inspect the billing. Somebody else did the billing, but it still had to go through him. So he was still accountable for the billing. And then when there were collections issues, he would jump on the phone and call the customer. Now, he had a collections clerk that would call the customer, but for the toughest ones, he would have to resolve it. So still, collections came back to him. He also looked at cash analysis. He was also the head of sales, yes, but in addition to being the head of sales, he was also a sales rep for a territory. And then, because every CEO needs to really do marketing, he had marketing, but he didn't really notice it as a role because it was just something he had to do. By the way, all the so-called had-to-dos are roles as well. And then he really needed someone to do marketing execution, just getting all those things done, but he was doing that as well. So when we laid out all these roles on a piece of paper, of course, Jack freaked out, right? So Jack freaked out. He said, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I have so many things to do. I mean, now I realize I have so many things to do. Now I realize why I'm always so busy. So he freaked out. To calm him down, we worked on a 4-quarter path of progress. We showed him how, over the next 4 quarters, he could relinquish a few of these roles. And he ultimately chose to relinquish most of these roles and ended up with 4 roles. You know, he ended up becoming the CEO. He hired a new CFO. He had a head of sales. He wanted to be like the sales advisor to the team, and he wanted to run marketing. So the lesson here is that an A player who is delivering C-level work, first ask how many hats he's wearing or she's wearing, or how many seats they're in before you choose to shoot them, because oftentimes they're in too many seats. So we have this tool that I hope you have downloaded, and we've provided a template. You notice head of company, sales, marketing operations. And sometimes something is easier than nothing to edit, right? So I like to say that it's easier to edit than to create. So we've given you something you can edit. So if you look at the roles on there, and these are roles for executive team, and you look on the roles there and you say, hey, some of these roles don't make sense to me, great. Strike them out and put in roles that make sense to you. I want to give you an example. So I'm asked for examples all the time, so I thought I'd give you an example. If you take a look at this example, one thing I really wanted to point out is that there are no standard KPIs that work for every single company. And I get asked this all the time. I get asked, Patrick, can you tell us what is the standard results expected for a CEO? Let's just take that as an example right now. So I've given you an example for a bunch of different roles so you can take a look at. But let me zoom in on the CEO. So for example, this particular CEO is a venture-run company. And by the way, all these roles are real, and these results are real. Okay, they're not one company, but they are, you know, from a collection of clients that we work with. And so this particular CEO is venture-funded, and so his VCs really care about growth. That's why they invested in this company. And so he cares about CAGR. CAGR stands for Compound Annual Growth Rate. And once he has his plan, how he inspects that he's on track is to look at his year-to-date sales and compare that to his plan, right? So his growth rate, CAGR, and he knows he's on track if his sales plan is achieving and doing well. Let me just pull out another one. This one, Tom from HR, and this particular company, they've agreed to really focus on getting A players. And so his goal, the result that he's looking for, is to have 75% of all the employees to be A players. And how does he know he's on track? Is to first work on the A managers, right? In other words, if I can have 75% of my managers being A's, I think that those A managers will make sure that the people that work for them would also be A's. And so that's how you check that he's on track. So if you look at this tool again, it starts with the role, and then I will go work on what are the results expected. And then from the results expected, how do I inspect? How do I know that I'm on track, right? How do I know I'm on track? And then finally, I put the name of the person in that role. I would suggest that you design it that way, that you put the name last, because oftentimes if you start with a name, you can be overly influenced by that person's capabilities. In other words, let's say I have, you know, a sales guy that is not doing very well. Let's just say his name is Jack, right? I use Jack to protect the innocent and the guilty in most of my stories. So let's say the guy's name is Jack, and Jack isn't doing well in sales, and you put in here, head of sales, Jack. results expected, you will now be influenced by what Jack can do. So I don't want you to put the name first. I want you to put the role down. Then I want you to put the result that you expect. How would you know that that person's on track? Then you go back and say, who's the person that should be in this seat? And that's kind of how you can also run a real quick test to see whether or not you have the right team with you. Okay, so do this for your teams. And by the way, what I meant to say before I move to a different slide is that the example I gave you was for the executive team. But you should use this sheet, and you should do this for every single one of your teams. Starting with the executive team, yes, and then go do it for all your different teams. Everyone in your company should know what results you expect from them and if they're on track. So for those of you in the room who said that you have 40% of you who took the poll earlier said that you had personal KPIs for your teams. Well, that's great. You have personal KPIs for your individuals, for individuals. You should be able to fill this out easily. You know, put the role down, put the result down. Those should be the individual KPIs. And then how do you know if he's on track? And then the name. So do this for all your teams. Okay. So just like I told Jack, the CEO, not to be overwhelmed, don't want you guys to be overwhelmed either. You want to document today's roles. You want to visualize a 12-month future. And then you want to plan for the next 4 quarters. So think of this as an org chart that's, quarter from quarter to quarter. And I would suggest you do this, especially if you're a growth firm. If you're a growing company, growing at more than 20% a year, 6 months from now, you may have hired 10, 20, 30 people. Your org chart and accountabilities could be very different. Most of us forget to review that. And so if you're growing that quickly, you may want to review this every 6 months. Okay? So new hires, new roles, and then who are the C players that are going to be replaced quarter by quarter. We have a number of clients in the room, in our virtual room, the Rhythm clients. And for our Rhythm clients, you should work with your coaches to make this part of your path of progress. And then inside the Rhythm system, I circled the growth tools, and there I circled the people tool, and you have this exact tool in the system for you to use. Oftentimes, we get a question. We get folks who want to learn more about what we do in our Rhythm coaching. And if you are interested in that, at the end of this webcast, please sign up for a Rhythm education session, okay? But I want to really spend time on teaching versus what we do today. So with that, are there any questions right now? It's a good time for me to pause and see if there are any questions as well.
Sure. So Michael has a question. He's asking, how many roles can a person have before being overtasked? We're growing and cannot hire to fill all positions in time.
So what I've found is that 3 to 4 roles, north of 4 roles, even a great person just cannot pull everything strongly. And what I would suggest if you're growing very fast is that you have no more than 3 roles for the person. And then if you have 1 or 2 roles that you need the person to kind of warm the seat, I would put that down. But I'll be very clear that these 2 roles are for you to warm the seat. And these are not more important than the top 2 or 3 roles that you're supposed to be accountable for. That way that person can prioritize and know that he does not or she does not miss any key items in the roles that he's accountable for.
Okay, and Amy's asking, do we do this exercise privately as senior executives or with our teams?
Well, I would suggest firstly you have an idea of how to direct a team in this exercise. So I think if you're the CEO, so it depends on who asks me a question. If you're the CEO, I would say first work with your partner or with 1 or 2 of your core executives. Okay? It's clearly difficult to work if you don't really have a sense of where you want the team to be. So once you get a sense of where you want the team to be, then I'll do it as a team. So I'll call the team into the room, I'll do it as a team, so each member can see and understand and also buy into the KPIs that they own as well as the KPIs that their teammates on the team owns. Any other questions, Ryan?
Yep, Jeff is asking, when I do this for a team or a group of salespeople or a team of consultants, won't they all have the same KPIs?
That's a good question, Jeff, and yes, they might. So for example, salespeople in your company should all be focused on the same way. However, the red, yellow, green could be different. In other words, the goal or sales quota may be different for different territory, right? But they should all be motivated towards the same type of KPI. So if I'm focused, everyone, on revenue growth, everyone should be on revenue growth, same KPI, you're right, but then maybe this larger region has a higher goal in the revenue growth than the smaller region. Okay, any other questions, Ryan?
Okay, now let's move on.
Okay, so point number 3 is let's work with some simple job scorecards, right? And I think of job scorecards as really a gift for your team, because when I do this hallway test, if I walk down the halls of many of my clients and I ask a random person, hey, you know, can you tell me what you were hired for? Very few people can actually tell me what they were hired for. Very few people actually pass the hallway test. So to pass the hallway test, you need to know what I was hired for, what is expected of me, and I need to know if I'm on track. And if I know that, and if I'm an A player on a high-performance team, I would also be open to how my manager can help me. So I think of this as a gift for my employees. So this is a job scorecard. This is one of the job scorecards that we use. And so do I know what results I'm supposed to deliver, and am I on track? That's the main purpose of this job scorecard. Now, I would actually use, the reason why I taught the people tool today is to support this job scorecard. So I would use the people tool to build your job scorecard. So I kind of circled John Sales. So you see that, you know, John Sales, he's the head of sales and marketing. He's also the head of sales. So he's got revenue goals, and he's got sales leads and things like that. Then you look at operations. Jim in operations, you know, he's head of operations. He also, for whatever reason, is head of manufacturing and service. So what you'll notice is that on the organizational accountability chart that we worked on just now, a person could be multiple roles. However, we're now going to build a job scorecard for that person. So you want to collect the different roles that this person is on, and you want to collect it into a job scorecard for this person under section 2, actually, the desired results. So the first thing you want to do with a job scorecard is define the job. And oftentimes we forget what the purpose of that job is. So why do we even have this position? Why do we care about this position? So you want to define the purpose of this position first. Then the second thing is you want clarity on what results are expected, that's section 2, and what skills and competencies are needed to do this job, right? So those are different from results. Results are the result KPIs that you're supposed to deliver. Skills and competencies are about whether or not you are capable of actually doing this job. Do you have the training? Do you have the attributes to do this job? Then the fourth section is living our core values. I'll document our core values and see how that person is performing. So earlier on, I was asked a couple of questions on how to rate, and I wanted to show you this scale. So I'm going to pause here a little bit and let you take a look at this scale. There are 3 things I'm rating here: results, your skill level and competencies, and if you're living your core values. So I'll just walk through this real briefly with you. So this is my chart. You don't have to use this chart, okay? You just have to create something for yourself that is very consistent. That means you would use this everywhere. So for example, if I look at criteria here, I would, you know, under the core values, I think I was asked just now, red would be gives lip service and uses the core values to maybe benefit themselves, maybe manipulate other people, okay? I rate that a score from 1 to 4. Yellow is someone who buys into values, but falls short under pressure, right? So, okay, you know, I'm going to live our core values until the water gets a little bit hot, and then I kind of, oops, you know, I slip up on the core values. I rate that somewhere between a 5, 6, and a 7. 8 and 9 is what I call green, consistent with our core values, even at the expense of short-term results. All right, so I'm willing to trade off some financial results for the company if I have to, but I'm going to live these core values. And super green will be someone that lives that core value even when it hurts me personally. That's super green. That's like the ultimate, right? The best you can get. So again, this is a chart that I actually use, but feel free to design your own. I just want to give you guys an example. And I hope I've answered your question. For those of you who asked this question earlier, and if I have not, you can ask me about it in a little bit when we open up for questions, okay? So now what do I do with this thing, right? What do I do with this thing, Patrick? Well, I would do 2 things with this thing. I would use it for hiring, and then I would use it for managing and for feedback. Most companies don't do this. Most companies don't have job scorecards. Maybe that should have been a polling question. But then for those who have job scorecards, they mainly use it for hiring. Then they use a totally different feedback and performance measurement system for the person that they hire. I'm suggesting to keep it real simple, which is why I'm suggesting you do this every quarter. I'm suggesting you use this job scorecard both for hiring and for managing. So if you want to hire an A player, those are the first 4 sections, right? What's the purpose? What results? What are the top 5 skills and competencies? Now, Brad Smart will actually suggest you go through, Brad Smart, the author of Top Grading, will suggest that you have a lot more skills and competencies. And I don't disagree with him. But what I do think is that a one-page tool is a whole lot easier to use in an interview. And I think that if you can just focus on the top 5 skills and competencies and rate that, you'd be doing great. So what I would suggest is when you use this tool for an A player, you walk in before you interview and you fill this out for the role. So for example, I decided to do a Chief Operating Officer role today because lots of times people said to me, Patrick, you give us sales examples and you give us R&D examples and CEO examples. How about operations? Okay, I'm going to give you an operations example today. So job position, Chief Operating Officer. Purpose of this job, make everything and everybody run smoothly in this company. And then he has this person will have 2 results that we want. One is this person, because he's operations, right? He actually helps the company move smoothly and he affects the EBITDA, the profit. So we want him to achieve our profit goal, get things more efficient, execute better, and achieve our profit goal. Remember, execution is about profit and time. And so we want him to achieve our profit goal. The second thing is that we want him to make the team work smoother. And so we're going to measure that by asking him to make sure that people achieve their number 1 goals, all right? So that's what we mean by green number 1, the number of green number 1s. And so look at red, yellow, green. That's, if the whole company, less than 60% of the people can achieve green on the number 1 priorities for the quarter, this person would be, this result would be red. Green would be at least 75% of everybody achieving the number 1 priorities, and super green would be at least 90% of everyone achieving that, okay? And then what are the skills and competencies? What are the skills and competencies this person needs? Intelligence, leader, deadlines, communications, coaching, and holding people accountable. And then these are our core values. These are actually the core values of the Gazelle system. So as a demo, I just put those core values down. So those are our core values. And so I'll fill this sheet out the way it is before I go out and hire, before I go and interview, before I even run the first screening interview. So I have this job scorecard. Then what I would suggest is that do group interviews, do team interviews. And so when we do a team interview, you have 2 or 3 people in the room interviewing that person. It saves time, it's great, and you're all hearing the same thing, okay? And what I suggest is that everyone has this sheet and rates the candidate according to these areas, because this is all that we care about. Can this person deliver the results? Can this person do it with the right skills and competencies? And will this person live our values? So everyone that's interviewing should rate this person in an interview with this one sheet. And then you can come out and you can compare notes. You're very consistent. You can compare the notes from the same interview. So first, hiring A players. Secondly, managing. So you start with the same job scorecard that you hired with. The same job scorecard. And this is something that most companies do not do. And so you can save a lot of time if you start with the same job scorecard. You want to provide feedback actions, and of course you are now allowed to update if you have to when needed, okay? So I would use the same consistent rating scale, same one I showed you earlier, and I think you should use it consistently all the way through. So to give you an example, let's say we hired Jack Dude, right? And so Jack Dude came on board as a COO. First quarter, how did he do on our EBITDA plan? Well, by the way, your KPIs need to be objective. So you notice the red, yellow, green is objective, right? And so you notice that in this case, I circled yellow, which means we did not achieve 100% of our plan, but we did get better than 90% of our plan, because less than 90% is red. But the good thing is that Jack actually did help our team achieve 75% of their green of the number 1 goals, all right? So that's how he did on the results. And then if you look at how is he on the skills and competencies, and if you're wondering how I rated that, you would again go back to this consistent rating scale, right? And then you rate the person, and actually I'll suggest that the person rates him or herself and then discusses with you. And I found that most people rate themselves lower. When I sit down with someone, usually they rate themselves lower and I have to bump up the rating a little bit. So this is how this person rated himself and with his manager. And 7 and 6 are yellow, so I've highlighted it in yellow. 10 was super green. And then this is how that person lived our core values. Notice the feedback. Manager's feedback says, Jack is a great fit, doing a great job. The notes above about how to get better and stronger. And Jack also provided his feedback. I feel more comfortable every day. I expect my second quarter to be stronger. I need to focus on making the profit goal. No excuses. That's a high-performance team guy talking right there. Okay, questions?
Yeah, I have a question from Lon. He's asking, having seen so many companies look the other way with top performers, how important is it to measure results and values equally?
So I think that's a great question, and I think it is very important. So, Jack Welch said this, and I found it to be very true, that if we turn the other way, you will have success today, but you will have great difficulty building a team that's successful for tomorrow. Very difficult. I'll share with you a personal story. My third company, we had a gentleman that came out of First Union Bank, and he was a chief quality officer of First Union Bank. And this is during the dot-com boom, so he came to work for me. Those are the days when everybody wanted to work for a tech guy in the dot-com boom before it became a dot-com bomb. And he didn't live our core values, but he was great. He was just awesome as far as operations and quality. And finally, after 6 months, we had to let him go. Of course, his name is Jack, because I protect the guilty and innocent in all my stories. And when we sat down with Jack to tell him that he had to move on because of the respect issue, he was devastated. He said, Patrick, I've been working on this, and I thought that I was done. I thought that I had improved. And I said, yes, Jack, you have improved. Unfortunately, just not good enough. We can't have this violation of our core values of respect. And finally, he said, okay, Patrick, I get it. He said, but please share with me who actually complained, like which is the straw that broke the camel's back. And I finally said, okay, fine. You're leaving anyway. I'll tell you. So I told him it was my receptionist, and he said, but Patrick, I can't believe you take her word over mine. I mean, she's just a receptionist. And I said, Jack, that's exactly why you have to go. So yes, I mean, it's really hard. It's really, really hard when someone's performing. But when Jack left my company, everyone rallied around that point that point of the work that he was doing, and we didn't skip a beat. We just continued, and we continued to become an even better and stronger company. So yes, I encourage you that, like I said, I would first counsel the person. I mean, Jack, we gave him 6 months, and we worked with him monthly on our core values, and we just couldn't get it. He just couldn't get it done, unfortunately. But sometimes, if they can get it done, I'd love to see a strong performer get it done and stay.
Thanks, Patrick. Lisa's asking, how do these tools work differently than a job description and position profile?
So job description and position profile is very, very similar. So unless I see yours, I don't quite know how this works differently. Most of the clients that I've worked with, when I've looked at the job description and profiles, I found that we could summarize it with the job scorecard. That's what I found. So again, Lisa, right, until I saw yours, it'd be hard for me to tell, but usually they're very similar tools, and maybe some information from the job description can go on to this. And one other thing I'll say is that oftentimes we would use the job description to try and build the ad, to attract the candidates, but we would use the job scorecard to assess, if that person has the right qualities and the right competencies to take the job.
And I've got a question from Robert, and there have also been many other questions like this one. Do you see managers summarizing the job scorecard to manage teams?
Do I see managers summarizing the job scorecard to manage teams?
Yes.
I would say that it's a yes and no answer. The yes part is if I have a team of programmers, right, and they're all programming, then I would have job scorecards which are very similar. I would still encourage the manager to build an individual job scorecard because, so for example, look at R&D, it may be that we're looking at velocity, and now a stronger programmer could have a higher velocity than a newer junior programmer. So yes, I think that the KPIs, the way you'd measure it, would be very similar. I think the competencies are almost going to be exactly the same, right? And then the core values are the same, but the red, yellow, green may be different. So I would still encourage you to start with a template, yes, but then individualize it so that every person has their own job scorecard. Also, one other thing is that there's magic when someone has an individual job scorecard. Somehow they feel, every time you have something more personalized, it feels better, right? So when somebody has his or her own job scorecard, it feels great.
And Clay has a question. We spend a lot of time and energy on poor performers. How do you keep and motivate a high performer?
That's a great question. So I would not spend that much time on poor performers. I'm sorry. I'd shoot them. Oh boy. Okay. So I was only partially joking, but I would not spend all my time on poor performance. In fact, I would suggest that you take the Marcus Buckingham approach, which is that you spend most of your time on your great performers. By the way, a long time ago, I read this book, First Break All the Rules, right, which I showed you up front. I remember walking to my company, and I remember telling everyone there that when I walked into your cube, how do you feel? And people were like, well, what did I just screw up? Because my CEO walked in. And I said to them, okay, I'm changing. I'm sorry. My fault. I screwed up. I'm going to de-suck myself. I said, moving forward, when I walk into your cube, it's going to be a reward to you because you're my star performer. I only want to work with folks that are performing great. It took me 6 months to a year to get the mindset in my company to actually embrace that. But then finally, when people were embracing that, I'd walk into their cubes and they'd be like, this is great. Patrick's here to help me take my good project and make it gooder, right? Or make it better. So no, I would suggest that you shift your energy to 75% of your time on your good performance and 25% of your time on your C players. If you can't fix them, have them move on. I know that sounds a little bit cold, but think of it as a stock that is doing well. You want to invest more in stocks that are doing well. You want to make sure that your A players get your time, your energy, your attention, your coaching, help them do better.
Okay, I got another one from Lon. He says, how concerned would you be if a direct report consistently self-rates themselves higher than you or their peers?
That's a great question. So first, I'll help that person face the brutal facts. I'll help the person see that they consistently rate themselves higher, and then we would address it, we'd talk about it, and then I would share with him that as a leader, humility is probably something he needs to learn. So, after a while, if that person consistently is not self-aware enough to rate himself correctly, he's probably not going to be a great manager, right? So the best leaders in the world are self-aware. So what this tells me is that this individual is just not self-aware enough. And if he's not that self-aware, I probably don't want him to be managing people. So Ryan, we took a lot of questions. That's great, but we kind of have to move on. I want to make sure we finish on time. Okay. So the fourth point, and it's a short point, is to inspire a path of progress. Why is that? Because usually when you look at something, I've found a couple of reasons. First, it could be overwhelming. Secondly, a journey is always more exciting. So if you can show someone that there is a path that we will take of progress, it's usually a little bit calming and much more exciting. So how do we measure progress? Well, let's get down to brass tacks. I believe if you have high-performance teams, you should be able to do more with less people or do more with your existing team. And this is why I care about high-performance teams, because we live in a world now where you actually have to do more with less. Okay, and so how can you do more with less? Throughput. Throughput's the only way. And I've told this story many times in my workshops. Some of you may have heard me say this before. I call this return on payroll. I say, hey, this month just started. You probably just wrote a payroll check, and guess what? You're going to write that payroll check every month, regardless of whether your people are going out there to perform or not. So I want you to improve your return on payroll, your ROP. And so the only way to improve your ROP is if you have stronger high-performance teams. So for example, in sales, I want more sales dollars with the same team. In R&D, I want higher velocity throughput with the same developers. In consulting, I want more revenues with the same or less number of consultants. So guys, it's about throughput. It's about getting more output from your company with the same number of people. Path of Progress. Path of Progress. This is one of my favorite books. This book Switch is about change management. But I actually, after reading it a couple of times, I think it's more about execution. So as you know, I'm an execution freak. And so I love this book. So you should just go read this book. But a couple of things I'll pull out from it. One is you need a clear and vivid description of your destination. Okay, you want to engage both the head and the heart. You want emotions to connect as well. And that's why I use the word inspire. You want to inspire the path of progress. And you also want to make it easier. You want to make it clear. You need to know a clear path, but you want to make it easier. If you have a choice, 5 things to do, pick the easiest one first so that somebody can get going, feel successful, and then move forward. So I want to give you a very simple path of progress today. This is just an example. It is not your path of progress. It's me taking the content I showed you and building a very simple path of progress that I personally would use. Okay? So over the next 4 quarters, the first quarter, I work on my baseline and I'll build my foundation. I'll assess my managers. I'll make sure that every manager gets on an A player plan or leaves. So I'll say that again. I would make sure that every manager gets on an A player plan or leaves. Now, if you're already an A player, that's great. That's great. But if you're a B player, here's your plan. I want you to be an A player. If you can't be an A player, at the end of the quarter, I want you to leave. Okay. I want to work on organizational accountability for my executive team. Okay. Leadership starts at the very top. If I cannot have organizational accountability for my team, myself, how can I have it for anybody else? I want to create a vision. What does my high-performance team look like so everyone can get excited? So in my quarter 2, I'm now going to turn my flywheel. Flywheel is Jim Collins' concept of improving your company 1 click at a time. So now I'm going to begin turning my flywheel. And I'm going to work on the organizational accountability for teams. I did it for my executive team last quarter. I'm doing it for my teams. Job scorecards for everybody, basically. And then I want to begin filling the holes in my organization chart, right, over 4 quarters. I don't want to be stressed out. I want to begin filling the holes there. And then my 3rd quarter, I'm going to turn my flywheel 1 more click. I'm going to work on my organizational 4-quarter plan, right, how to fill in the holes and all that. I'm going to do quarterly reviews with the job scorecards. I'm going to have a baseline measurement for each team's throughput. Now, how do I know if we're getting better? I won't unless I have a baseline. And so lots of times people don't give me the baseline because they don't have it exact. And I'll suggest don't worry about making it exact. Just have a baseline, and you can always tweak it later. All right? And then the 4th quarter, again, I'll work on my organizational plan, quarterly reviews, and I'll set goals now to improve throughput. So this is just a very simple, 4-quarter path of progress. Okay? So what we covered today is 4 things you got to do. Hiring only A managers, providing clarity of accountability, managing with simple job scorecards, and then having a path of progress. So part 2 is going to be in a couple of weeks. I'm traveling, but I'm going to record a part 2 is what's the team got to do, right? What does the team got to do? How does the team have to react? And I'm going to show you a couple of things on how the team really has to own their own progress in order to create a high-performance team. And so that's the teaser, but I will send you out a webcast recorded in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So Ryan, I think we have maybe 1 minute for a question or so.
So one question here from Carol is on interviewing. Did you recommend interviewing as a group, or what about interviewing individually?
Oh, I love interviewing as a group. I would highly suggest interviewing as a group because you hear the same stuff. And I used to interview individually, and what I found was that somebody could fool me because they would walk out of the room, they would learn something from someone on my team, but they would then react differently to the next person, and they will learn something, and then they will react again differently. So what I found is that if we interview as a team, we'd all hear the same thing. Then we rate using a job scorecard, and then we can have a good discussion. So I love interviewing as a team.
Okay, I think that that concludes the webcast for today. So thank you so much. Please help us by taking a minute to give us some feedback on the webcast after it completes. And you'll see a screen pop up with a survey after you close the webcast. I hope you found the tools and insights that Patrick provided helpful. And please indicate on the survey if you would like us to contact you or follow up anything concerning the rhythm coaching or software program that Patrick mentioned. Every week, Patrick blogs about things we've shared with our clients or learned from our clients. And so feel free to join his blog at www.gazellesystems.com. Thanks so much, Patrick, and thanks to all of you for joining us.
Hey, man, I had a great time. I hope you guys all got something out of this 1 hour with me, and thank you for coming. Have a great week.
Thanks again. Everyone have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.